I can be a pretty vindictive person. I'll tell you a little bit about my personality before I start explaining where this is all coming from. I've been a pretty aggressive person throughout my life. The tomboy in the room, whose parents feared I was going to come out as a lesbian. Which is ridiculous, as I don't consider lesbians to be the only ones who can be categorized as tough women. That's a stupid stigma. Per se, I'm comfortable with the idea of liking boys. I was feared by several, and I like the idea of me being the dominant one, the alpha, without having to pay obeisance to anyone. However, I admit that I have a flaw that I dealt with in my psychological therapies. I like men who are as strong or stronger than me. I can't avoid the idea of a man taking me as his own and protecting me, even if I don't need protection as such. That's why I've been unlucky in love. At first, in high school, I dated guys weaker than me because I couldn't find someone better, but as time progressed and I got to college, that changed. Now I had a whole menu of possibilities to choose from. Older guys who could confront me and make me see that I might not be in control of everything, so it was my most active dating phase. However, it wasn't all good either. It was a dangerous stage, since like many silly girls, I ended up dating guys who might as well have their own mugshot stored in their phone gallery. I remember dating one who even had a motorcycle, something that drove me crazy. But I realized that he used to lend it to a cousin to roam the city, if you know what I mean. When I found out about that, I almost ended up in legal trouble because my boyfriend wouldn't let me out of the relationship. He said that if I stayed away, he would shut me up forever. And that idea scared the hell out of me. Luckily, I managed to get out of it, only to get into another violent relationship. I'm not talking about physical violence as such. My partners know very well that I can break their faces with a glass at any time. My height, I'm 6'1", proves me right because everyone usually sees me from below. But they were arguments that ended in hot days in bed, but not in the healthiest way. I'm very grateful to my psychologist for making me realize that this was not synonymous with a good life, but that at the rate I was going, I would be visiting my grandparents sooner than a rooster could crow. It was just that relationship that made me go to therapy so I could get my life back on track. I met Alan just weeks after I started therapy at a coffee shop. He worked as a barista, and I'm not lying when I say that he was one of the most masculine men I had ever seen in my life. I mean, even though he wore the company apron and cap, many girls still drooled at the thought of drinking a hot beverage made by those big muscular arms. He is 6'2", so you can understand that we hit it off almost instantly. We were, in each other's words, the first people we could look directly into each other's eyes without the other being afraid. It was a good introduction, and that's why I decided to ask him out. That's right, I was the one who made the first move. Many will call it pathetic, but to me, they are the pathetic ones who stay at home watching series and complaining about not having a movie relationship, even though they do nothing about it. Don't you think? Anyway, we went out, hit it off, and in just a month we became boyfriend and girlfriend. Our relationship was pretty good. He's very independent and manages to take control of his stuff almost instantly. I haven't seen him in the middle of conflicts many times. Usually, when he says he'll take care of something, the next day it's all taken care of. That was one of the many, many reasons I fell head over heels in love with him. The only slightly low issue he had was his relationship with his mother, who was sometimes a pain in the ass for me. She is gossipy, petty, and very exploitative, being that she is hated even by members of her family, I was told. Alan is sometimes a lapdog with her, doing all the chores for her, going back and forth for her, with the excuse that she is too old for, at this point, everything, so he must take care of her, as he doesn't have enough money to hire a personal nurse. I mean, my parents were older than she currently is when they were alive, and they were always completely independent. His independence dies when his mother enters the conversation. Now that I have touched on the subject, I'll say a little about my situation. My parents passed away 2 years ago, and Alan not only took care of me at that moment, but he was a pillar for me in one of the weakest seasons of my whole life. If it wasn't for him, I don't know what would have happened to me. I'll be honest, my family is of somewhat abundant wealth, and when my parents passed away, I was left alone with a house that might as well be considered a small mansion. Soon after this happened, Alan proposed to me, so we moved in together, just not right away. His mother is the kind of conservative person who doesn't take kindly to living together before marriage, but with a house of our own and papers in hand, we could be free of that little woman. Or maybe not so much. I've gone off the deep end a lot in all this text, but to put it in context, my mother-in-law wants to move in with us, and there's nothing I hate more than not having my privacy. Alan says that if it were anyone else, he would have no problem saying no, but we're talking about his greatest love, his regent, whose feet he licks as she walks. I may sound exaggerated, but I'm helpless about that, and it's because at one time, my house was full of people. Uncles, cousins, grandparents, but they all grew up and left the country, or passed away. And little by little, the house became more solitary and quieter. It's an old house from when the city was built, when it was just a small town. So it's huge, big enough to house about 20 or even 30 people. And it sounds weird that I wanted it all to myself, but when you live in a small community as a child, peace is not usually so present. Even with my parents, I couldn't have peace of mind. And look, it's not that I was glad about what happened to them, it's just that I could finally have the house for myself, or better said, for Alan and me. Of course, it would take more effort to keep it in order. Cleaning it is a chore almost every day, and at the moment, we can't afford to finish fixing the electrical problems. My parents, although rich, neglected many things, and before they died, although it sounds tragic, they barely managed to solve some plumbing problems we had. Perfect. We could hardly take a good bath, and they didn't have the privilege to enjoy it. The house has electrical problems that make some parts highly conductive to voltage, so you have to be careful with them. I know where the places are, but I haven't even talked to Alan about it. I may have inherited my parents' cluelessness, even if it's something kind of, deadly. Or maybe I'm exaggerating. And now, my mother-in-law is coming to live with us, and she's very nosy about things. She gets to touch everything, makes allies with the most annoying neighbors, and I think the only good thing she does is go grocery shopping. But she doesn't even help with meal prep. I will try to talk to Alan about it, because I don't want something ugly to happen. Update 1. I'm sorry for cutting the last update so abruptly. It's just that Alan had come into the room, and I don't want him to read any of this. I'm doing it anonymously, so I can release some of the tension I have. And as I told you, my mother-in-law is coming with us in 3 days, and I must get used to living with her, being the well-known stereotype of an annoying mother-in-law. They, unlike my family, haven't had the same opportunities, so she tends to be a real freeloader with things. Picture this. I have a giant house all to myself, and I can't even bear the thought of another person living with us. It sounds selfish, but it's just to preserve the peace of mind I have. On that note, I don't even know if I'm even going to consider having a baby at some point. It would be kowtowing to someone, and as you know, that's not my style. I've talked to Alan about that situation, but I'm the one who has it to lose. Update 3. It's official. I'm an expert at not knowing how to write endings. I read the last update, and I'm even embarrassed for you. You don't know how my blood boils when a story is badly told, but what I'm about to say now makes me even angrier. The lady did it. She took over the house, and all for the stupidest reason in the world. She fell. Yes, just as you are reading. Let's see, my house has 2 floors, so it has a vast set of stairs. Duh. But the idiot couldn't have fallen anywhere else but on the 3 stairs that connect to the backyard. We're talking about a fall of 2 feet from the ground, or less than 2 feet, and she fell on a pile of grass, so the impact was cushioned. But it took this to happen for the woman to start making the fuss of the year, saying that she had dislocated, read well, and I'm not lying, from her neck to her ribs, and starting to call Alan and me to come to her aid. Or well, him, because if it were a real illness, she'd be communicating with me too. She's looking for a selective savior, of course. I almost offended them when I entered the house, and found her with a neck brace, and the news that she hadn't gone to see the doctor. That's why I say it's all fake. If it were really an accident, she would even be calling Dr. House to come to her aid. I mentioned this to Alan, and he got upset, saying that I was selfish and had no regard for his mother. I insisted that if the pain was so bad, why not go to the doctor? Even I could pay for it, since the lady's excuse was money, but he told me that it might offend her. Come on! That's what I mean by being a lap puppy. When he argues with me, Alan tends to show his teeth and claws just like myself, but he becomes tame when it comes to his mother, something that is precisely the very subject I hate the most and that makes us argue the most in this life. And how does this story end? Oh well, nothing. Now Mr. Nice Guy will stay half the time to take care of his mother, earning less than half of what he used to. On that note, it's already getting a little uncomfortable, because if that's the case, I don't think we'll be able to afford the upkeep of the house. At this point, I feel that I alone could, but with that woman being a constant expense in medicine, we'll not be able to move forward as a couple, and this ring I have in my hand is getting heavier and heavier. This time, I'll say goodbye for a change. I'll be writing in a month or so to see how things go if I don't decide to move out of my own house. Update 4. It was only 3 days short of a month, but I really reached my limit. I've left my own house. That woman did it. She made me lose my temper, and now I'm looking for a way to give her and her idiot son the biggest lawsuit in the world. I've had a strong character all my life, and I've thought I was the queen of the world for all my 34 years of life, but never in my entire existence have I been so embarrassed, and now I feel smaller than ever. Alan hit me. I'm not kidding. Seriously, he slapped me because I insulted his mother, and now I'm writing this as someone I'm not. A stupid, weak, simple-minded crybaby. During that month, things were complicated. Argument after argument, with several of those days ending up sleeping on the furniture, whether it was him or me, and the woman still bothering us until I had enough of it. And in the middle of a fiery argument between Alan and I came to where she was, telling her that I couldn't take her abuse anymore. It was because she had brought some friends over to the house, having some sort of tea party, with the excuse that they were going to visit her because of her condition, when in fact it was just to show off the new house she had acquired. That's what I heard her say, although she denied it later. When I told Alan this, he didn't take it well. I waited until the end of the day to tell him this, but of course he didn't believe me, and when I got to face his mother, she started throwing crocodile tears, saying that she had never said that, and that I was a jealous liar about her new home. That's when I lost it. I said everything to her. Insults I never thought I'd throw at a 60-something-year-old person, to the point where I got to feeling a little sick. She said to Alan, "Are you going to let this little woman treat me like that? You're the macho man. Make yourself respected." And when I hurled the biggest of insults at the old lady, Alan couldn't take it and slapped me in the face in a way that even he thought was excessive. It was the first time a man had ever hit me, and the worst part was that the lady did nothing. Rather than being concerned about her son's display of violence, she let the scene go unpunished, and if you ask me, she was even proud of it. I went to a coworker's house, and I am writing this as a promise that I will do something about it. I mean, they had to have seen the look on my coworker's face when she saw that I specifically came to ask for help, because in her words, "You are the strongest person I know, and getting kicked out of your own house was a tough pill to swallow." And I don't blame her if even I sympathize with this thought. Update 5. Before you condemn me for the last unfinished update, I must tell you that this story has a satisfactory ending, and I must tell you that I don't care at all if you feel bad about what I'm going to tell you, or if you label me as a bad person because after what I went through, I don't care about anything. My ex-mother-in-law is on the verge of death, and it was her own fault. You see, as I told you last time, I left the house on my own, and I was there for less than a week, which felt like forever. I remember that after a couple of days, Alan started looking for me like crazy, asking me where I had gone, but I remained silent without saying a word to him. So much so that I asked the guard at the building where I work not to let him in, and he couldn't wait for me outside because his mommy's care was such that he couldn't leave her alone for long. Unbeknownst to me, the idiot lost his marriage because he was weak. Maybe he slapped me, but that's just a sign that I ended up being stronger. But I digress. Now, what happened to the lady? I'm sure I commented at some point to her about the electrical problems the house was having and the areas where the problem was getting out of control, but I don't know. It might be because of her senile dementia or something. She ended up going into one of the forbidden rooms, not surprising, as she couldn't stop walking all over the house, and suffered some sort of shock that left her scorched and rolling around on the floor, being petrified until her son arrived a few minutes later. I say it was her fault not only for going into one of the forbidden rooms, but also because of her condition, she wasn't supposed to make much of an effort getting out of bed. But as she is incapable of listening to even the simplest of orders, well, there she was, in ICU for a whole season. The funniest part of this whole thing is that they tried to sue me for it. As crazy as it sounds, yes, they tried to sue me for not telling them a rather sensitive piece of information about where they were, being that I had already told them, or at least that's what everyone thinks. Or, well, let's say it's a half-truth. I say it is because I told the lady about this fact when she was half asleep some time ago, and Alan, knowing that she couldn't do physical exertion, didn't think she would be brute enough to do something like that. It seems like he doesn't know his own mother, and now the lady is on a stretcher being attended to by Alan, with a pain that could be confirmed to be real. Anyway, the lawsuit was actually a bit tight, with some contractual loopholes that even went as far as trespassing. Because if you didn't know, she came to the house on her own, without explicit authorization from me, the owner of the house. Moreover, if we went without having other individuals registered, they didn't count as members of the house. I understand the whole thing about us being legally family, but then we come back to the fact that the lady was not supposed to be out of bed at the time, to go to a room she was not supposed to be in. However, it all worked out behind the scenes in a bitter conversation I had with Alan, which I call my biggest love failure, but the sweetest victory of my life. We were at... what? On the second visit to the courthouse? That's when I decided to pull Alan aside at recess to tell him a couple of little things. The first was to end this charade he was putting on with his mother, as it wasn't going to do him any good. We had already talked about divorce and such, so there was no need to continue. But seeing that they wanted to humiliate me further, I told him I would pull the 2 cards I had under the table. The mentioning at his work about how he had left half a schedule over a supposedly made-up illness of his mother from weeks ago, and worse, the slap he gave me. And I didn't just stop at words, because when he told me I was bluffing, I showed him a little scar, nothing more, and nothing less than photos of the marks he had left on me with the slap. I had taken them with my colleague because she told me that in case they were needed, crime scene photos were a good option to get some things right in the future. And why? Because I was going to sue him first. Only a pair of idiots beat me to it. Telling him all this made him drop the tough guy facet and enter a new desperation mode. The lapdog had transformed into a submissive tadpole, and that's when the balance of power began to shift in my favor. I told him I would keep everything in line on the condition that he and his mother would leave the house and leave it to me alone, without the possibility of ever living there again. What's more, to humiliate him a bit, because I can be somehow evil too, like a Disney villain, I asked him to give me his key, as I would be destroying it the next day, melting it down or something. I could appreciate his head down as he did so, and that he raised the charges against me was the cherry on top of the cake. The condition was that they had to leave the house as soon as possible, and since the lady was still in the hospital, the process was much easier. Better yet, since the lady had other people keep her belongings in the house, they now had to answer for them, taking those things with them to their old house. While mine was left half empty, at least there I could reinvent myself as a person. Although you may think that I will be happy and joyful about all this, the truth is that I feel a bit lonely. It's the first time in real life that I have the house to myself, and now I don't know what to do with it. Being a conflictive person, I know that living with others will cost me a little, but this experience has helped me to know myself better and to see that sensitive side that I didn't think I had. And I haven't yet fixed the problem of the electric body in the house being a danger to myself, as long as I don't go into the forbidden rooms like a complete idiot. My future partner, when I come looking for him in a while, will have to support me in all things without losing himself to please someone else, including me. Anyway, I'm seeing how I can repair the electrical system on my own. Work is paying off a bit more now that I have no extra expenses, though I'm considering adopting a cat or something, while dealing with a new problem. In a house this big, any noise can signal something. I'm not much for ghosts or anything like that, but I'm all about being able to finally be a little calmer. And if I have to start sharing all these rooms with a paranormal tenant, well, welcome aboard. Ha ha ha, nah. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but at least those tenants can't touch me, and if I know someone else dares to, well, let's just say I won't be playing the damsel in distress position anymore. I may have a strong character, but I know it takes more than that to survive. In that case, whatever it takes, I'm 100% sure I have it.